besties, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Amanda and I obviously love to read. If you are not new here or new here, I guess it doesn't really matter. This is a background that I have right now. It's definitely not permanent. Trust me, I know it is not the most aesthetically pleasing book background. However, it is the background that I have right now. We are working on getting me new bookshelves, so fingers crossed that will be soon and this will look very different. Let's get into today's video. I first want to address that I have been quite absent on this channel, and that is really just because of two things. We moved semi-recently. We're getting to the point where I can't really use that as an excuse anymore, but to be fair, things are kind of still chaotic. This particular room, still a mess. It has been extremely difficult for me to find the time to be able to film these types of videos. It has been difficult for me to film these videos in general because, just for like context, this library room is in the middle of the apartment. And directly across from me, behind a door, is Ace's office. And if you're new here, I have severe, my throat's already getting dry. I have severe filming anxiety. Filming when other people can hear me, when other people can see me. And yes, it's my partner, and I shouldn't really care what he thinks or know that he's not judging me or anything like that, but it's just a mental block that I've not been able to get away from yet. In addition to all of those things, your girl has been in a reading slump, and it has been a nightmare. Let me tell you, it's been a fucking nightmare. I have been a reader for officially 2 years, and in that 2 years, I have never, ever been in a reading slump until April-ish. It was kind of lingering, but like April, it really it just sucked the shit out of me. Without further ado, those are the reasons why I haven't filmed a whole lot, haven't been reading a whole lot to be able to film. So anyway, here we are, and I am going to do what is essentially my spring wrap up. We are going to go through everything I read in the months of April, May, as well as June. Now that we are in July, and speaking of reading slumps, I don't want to jinx it, but dare I say I might be out of my reading slump. So, we'll see. Anyway, handy dandy notes, as per usual, to remind my little pea brain what we have been reading lately. So let's get started with what I read in the month of April. So the very first book that I picked up in the month of April was Game On by Navessa Allen, which is book 3 in the Into Darkness. There we go. I was like, Lights Out is definitely not the name of the series. It's the Into Darkness trilogy. They are interconnected standalones if you are not familiar. To be honest, this one's pretty up there for me. It might be my favorite, and I know that's pretty controversial. Most people love Lights Out more than any of the other books, but this one was pretty fucking good. I did rate this 4.5 stars. This book follows Tyler and Stella. Tyler, he's like the head person of an illegal gambling ring where he is intentionally taking advantage of rich people. He happens to rip off Stella's younger brother, which is how she ends up getting involved. She is a tattoo artist. Tyler approaches her one day in her tattoo studio, pretends like he's a normal, patient. He's a normal customer coming in for a tattoo. And I think like, as she's putting the stencil on him, okay, this is so irrelevant, Amanda. Rein it in. Long story short, Stella ends up taking the debt away from her brother with Tyler, and instead of her actually having to pay him money, he's like, just be my fake date, basically. So there's fake dating, illegal gambling. It's obviously very, very smutty. And there was I don't necessarily know that it's a trope, but there was something that happened in this book, spicy wise, that I love. So that's probably why this book is my favorite. Yeah, we're gonna stick to that. This is my favorite out of the trilogy. So yeah, anyways, I rated it 4.5 stars. We're gonna move on. After reading Game On by Navessa Allen, I was feeling like, up until this point in the year, at the beginning of April, I have had almost nothing but great reading months. January, February, and March of this year were amazing. I read some of the best books that I've read in my 2 years as a reader. So I was feeling cocky, if you will, confident that I was going to continue this. So the next thing I decided to pick up was ACOTAR. Yep. For some reason, it was just calling to me. And I was like, you know what? I'm finally going to start this series and I'm going to read it. I loved this. I can't even hide it. This book deserves literally every single bit of hype that it ever gets, that it's ever gotten. This book is God tier. I just am speechless. It was amazing. And it was so amazing that I'm pretty sure it's what nailed the coffin on my reading slump. Because after I finished this, nothing sounded good. Nothing has really felt the same since reading this. And even after reading book 1, it was so good that I did immediately start book 2, but then I read like maybe a chapter and put it down and was like, no, I must savor this feeling for a rainy day. So I still have currently only read book 1 because I'm literally petrified to read the other books because this was that good. So yeah, deserves the hype. Don't know what else to say about that. Now, of the 9 books that I read in April, those were the only 2 that I read off my physical TBR. Yeah, if you are new here, hi. I like to set goals and not follow through with them. One of the goals that I set at the beginning of this year for reading in particular was to kind of cut down on listening to random audiobooks, reading random Kindle books. That way I could try and pare down my massive physical TBR. Because hi, I'm Amanda and I have over 700 books and I've only read maybe 15% of those books. Yeah, it's kind of a problem. So I'm trying to dwindle down on my physical TBR and I'm not doing very good at it. Moving into the 3rd book that I read in April, I read a Kindle book, and actually I'm pretty sure I only listened to the audiobook. Anyways, that was The Intruder by Freida McFadden. Freida McFadden books are tricky for me. They are extremely hit or miss, and 70% of the time they're a miss. So are they really hit or miss? They're usually a miss, I'll say that. And this one was a miss for me. This one, much like most of Freida's books, if not like most thriller books nowadays especially, it follows 2 separate timelines. Obviously, you don't really know what's going on until they end up converging. For me, this one just, the plot twist was kind of blah, and the ending was like open-ended. Like it didn't really wrap up, and that really bothered me. Moving on to book 4 that I read in April. I thought I owned this, and I'm still pretty sure that I do, but I literally don't know where it is. That is The Rose Bargain by Sasha Peyton Smith. This is number 1 in that particular series. Book 2 just recently came out, and it is a completed duology. So I was excited to start this. This is basically blurbed as Bridgerton, but make it fae. Like Bridgerton and The Bachelor kind of a situation. And that was really, really intriguing to me. However, this was a huge letdown for me. I did rate it 3 stars, but to be honest, that probably needs to be like a 2.5 because I don't remember anything about this book. It was very forgettable. It was very, I don't want to say boring, but it just personally did not catch my attention. Again, coming off of reading ACOTAR, really hard to like something else that's pretty mediocre, not gonna lie. And I will not be continuing the series. If that was a question you were wondering, I will not be reading book 2. I actually could not care less. Book number 5 that I attempted to read in April was Whispers of the Deep by Emma Hamm. This one, I unfortunately DNF'd around the 60% mark. Here's the thing. I don't think this was a bad book. I think it was definitely wrong book, wrong time, mixed with the reading slump situation, again, being perpetuated by ACOTAR. Nothing was really gripping me. I read this sheerly based off of recommendation from Laura, who loves monster romance. I also love monster romance. Really thought I was gonna like it, and I just thought it was boring. I just couldn't care less about what was going on, and at the 60% mark, I just had to cut it because I just didn't care. After that, I tried finding anything that was really, really going to catch my attention, and what I ended up landing on is super random, but it is Egotistical Puckboy by Finley and Saxon James. This is the first book in the Puckboys series, and this, I believe, is, I think there's a series by these two authors that comes before this one, and I just didn't care. I wanted to start here, and I believe this is a 10-book series. Spoiler alert, I didn't read all 10 yet, but I did read book 1, and I rated it 4 stars. I absolutely loved book 1. It made me feel like, okay, the reading slump is gone. Like, I love reading again. Life is worth living again. Those were the feelings that it gave me. Okay, so I didn't write a whole lot in my review about what this book was about, and I don't really remember the plot, but I do remember like the vibes and how it made me feel. This series, if you did not know, is a male-male hockey series. The first one follows 2 guys, Ezra and Anton, who both work for the NHL, and they basically start off being rivals, but then they're forced to work together. One thing leads to another, and they fall in love, and it was just a silly fun time. Now, after that, it was so good that I was like, you know what? Let me read the next one, just in case this was a fluke. I just want to see what happens. So I did pick up the next book in the series, which is Irresponsible Puckboy, again by Finley and Saxon James. This one I actually rated 4.5 stars. This one got me. It was absolutely adorable. It was so silly. You could really tell that the authors weren't taking the story very seriously, because it was kind of over the top ridiculous, but I thought it was endearing and I thought it was absolutely adorable. This one follows Dax and Trip, who are 2 hockey players who have been best friends for maybe 5 or so years. Dax is, for lack of a better word, his character is an idiot. He's kind of a himbo. He's attractive, but he's got nothing going on upstairs. And that is literally 75% of his entire personality is just being ditzy. Dax has been dating a girl for quite some time. They've been in a long-term, serious, committed relationship. She keeps pressuring him to get married. He's like, oh, I don't want to. It's not that I don't love you, but I just don't really see myself ever getting married, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't want to lose that relationship, so he wants to try to want to get married, if that makes sense. Okay, so then his best friend Trip, you find out Trip has been in love with Dax basically since they started being friends, and it absolutely kills him inside that his best friend is not gay, that he's not interested in him, so on and so forth. So he's been pining after him for 5 years. Well, Dax, being the idiot that he is, he basically comes up with this plan that him and Trip are going to get fake married in Las Vegas by going to one of the wedding chapels in Las Vegas, and he tells Trip, oh, it's not going to be legally binding if we don't sign the paperwork. Yeah, I'm sure you can see where that ends up going, and it's a silly fun time. I absolutely loved it. After getting through that book, this was right before we were about to move, literally days before we were about to move, and moving really fucked up my reading. I didn't have any of my books nearby. I couldn't see my books. I wasn't surrounded by books, and it was really depressing, the opposite of inspiring. It was just depressing. For some reason, instead of going into book 3 of Puckboys, I decided to slightly switch gears and went into Changing the Game by J.J. Mulder. Back in January or February of this year, I read most of J.J. Mulder's other series, the SCU Hockey. And this one technically comes before that one. Again, I don't really care. Doesn't really matter to me. Anyway, I did decide to start that series. Here's the thing. This one I rated 3 stars. I can stick by that because it was entertaining enough for me to get through it. However, if you've never read J.J. Mulder before, you would probably love this. Because I started with her other series, which is newer, it's better. Objectively, it's better. So having to go back and read the older series after already reading the new one, it was giving first book syndrome. It also really, really irritated me that the plot in the first book of this series is virtually identical to the first book's plot in the other series. And I just couldn't stop comparing the two and thinking about why would the author do this. It was just driving me crazy. This book is about Troy and Sam. Troy is a hockey player. Sam is their intern, and they end up being roommates, and that's pretty much it. And last but not least, book number 9 that I read in April was Big Age by Kenya Barris. This is an Audible original, so it is only available on audio through Audible. It's only about 3 hours long, and it has a pretty top-rated cast. Like Cedric the Entertainer is one of the main characters. I went into this knowing that I was not the target audience, okay? This is definitely my parents. People who are at the retirement age. This is geared towards people who were at that age. A lot of this stuff I couldn't necessarily personally relate to, but could relate to in the sense of, you know, my parents are kind of going through the same situation. Well, not the same situation, but they're the same age, okay? So like, I got it. However, I rated this 2.5 stars simply because, yes, it was entertaining. Yes, it was funny, but the storytelling of this book just didn't make a lot of sense. It was more like slice of life versus actually having a plot. Like there wasn't like a beginning, middle, and an end. There wasn't like a point to the story. You know what I mean? It was just a story that happened to be told. I didn't love that, so that's how we ended the month of April. Moving into May. So we moved at the very end of April. Pretty much for the entire month of May, we were obviously unpacking. My book situation was not even close to how it is right now. Like I said a little bit ago, that really put a damper on me reading. I just felt super uninspired. So in the month of May, I only read a total of 5 books. That is the lowest number of books I have read in a month since I started reading again. It's been at least 2 years since I have read so few books in a month. And let me tell you, it was weighing on me the entire time, and it's still weighing on me. Because though I know 5 books is a good number for a lot of people, it's more than a lot of people read in a month. However, for me personally, I typically read at least 12 books. So only having 5 in a month was really discouraging. So I started off kind of going back to what I left off with in April. I was kind of on a male book kick. I was gonna say male hockey, but this one is actually not hockey related. The first book that I read in the month of May was Hidden Scars by Andy Jackson. This has been on my TBR for quite some time. I had been not like intentionally, but unintentionally putting it off because I know that this one is super emotional, and I was just kind of waiting for when I was going to be in the mood for that. And let me tell you, it was emotional as fuck. This book had me sobbing for both of the characters. There was so much trauma in this book. It was insane. Oh, it is hockey. Just kidding. Yeah, not me completely forgetting the plot. This story follows Jeremy and Preston, who are both apparently college hockey players. I think you find out like in the very first chapter, I think there's a prologue before the book starts, that Preston's dad is super abusive. So please check your triggers before you decide to read this book, because there is a lot of that on page and is quite difficult to read at times, or listen to in my case. Jeremy and Preston end up becoming roommates, and that's pretty much where the story goes. There's not a whole lot I can really tell you about the plot because it's just their romance. I will say that the audiobook was expertly narrated because one of the boys, Preston in particular, was played by Teddy Hamilton. And Jeremy was played by somebody that I have started to love as well, named Iggy Toma. He pretty much voices all of, well, he's the voice of one of the boys in all of the SCU hockey series audiobooks. So being able to hear his voice again was very nostalgic for me, and it made me really happy. So book number 2 that I read in May is going to come out of the leftist left field. If you know my reading taste, you're going to be like, huh? That's really random. And that is Pines by Blake Crouch. If you are not familiar with this series, this is book 1 in a trilogy by Blake Crouch, obviously, called Wayward Pines. It ended up being adapted into a TV show. The TV show came out in 2015, and it got 2 or 3 seasons. Anyways, I've watched the entirety of that show, and it is such a creepy, atmospheric, thriller-esque, sci-fi-esque kind of a show that's really stuck with me since I watched it. And when I learned that it was a book and that it was by Blake Crouch, which, if you don't know, is the author of Dark Matter, Recursion, Upgrade. He is very popular in the sci-fi world today. And to know that those books were written by him, and I didn't even know this series had books, I was like, listen, I gotta read it. We're at the point in my reading slump where we're throwing things and seeing what's gonna stick to the wall. So I decided to read Pines by Blake Crouch, and this was 4 stars. What I really enjoyed about this book is the same stuff I loved about the TV show. It is creepy, it is atmospheric. The entire time you're like, literally, what the fuck is going on? Now, I knew what was going on because, again, I've seen the TV show, and this was one of like the only times that I have read the book after watching the show, where vice versa, it doesn't really matter. But it's the first time I have read a book that has an adaptation where the book and the adaptation are neck and neck. Like, they are virtually identical to each other, which I really enjoyed because, again, I love the TV show. So getting to read the book version of that was awesome. Now, I, as I normally do, did not continue the series. Yeah, I know. At the time, I was just kind of like, what's the point? Because book 1 wraps up really neatly. And I think the reason for that is when you move on in the series, you're not following the same main character. So you're in the same world, you're still in Wayward Pines, and you're finding out more about what's going on there with the Abbeys, but it's not following the same main character. So anyway, because it wrapped up really nicely, I was like, you know what, I actually don't have to read the second one right now, and I just didn't want to. So I will read it actually pretty soon, probably, because now I have the audiobook. So anyways, moving on, the next book that I unfortunately read in the month of May was Love Me Stalk Me by Lauren Bishop. I rated this 2 stars because, boy, I wish I would have DNF'd this book. This is a book that I wasn't anticipating picking up, but weirdly, I know, very weird for me, I started reading blurbs. It occurred to me that I could probably find books that I like more by learning what they're about before reading them. So while in the slump, I decided to start reading blurbs to find out if I was actually going to be interested in the book before picking it up. So I read the blurb, and the blurb of this got me so hard that I downloaded it and started reading it immediately. This follows Izzy, who is the store manager of a really upscale retail store. Her store has been dealing with some really wild shoplifting shenanigans. Because of that, her store hires on a new head of security named Cal. Pretty sure it's Callahan. Anyways, but they hire on Cal as head of security, and when they meet, he is basically like, oh my God, I love you. Not to her face, obviously, but he ends up stalking her. But I don't know, in some very unusual ways. Like, I was really interested in this because of the stalker element. It's literally in the title. And in my opinion, this was a really, really, really poor example of a stalker romance. There was maybe like 5% stalking. 5% and you put it in the title, just saying, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. In addition to them being co-workers, Izzy's best friend convinces her to download this app on her phone, which basically allows her to have an AI boyfriend. Well, Cal ends up hacking into her phone and essentially pretending to be this AI boyfriend that she thinks she's talking to. Yeah, and things just kind of go from there. Like I said, the premise to me seemed obviously silly, but it also seemed interesting, and it wasn't. It was a letdown, not gonna lie. The next book that I picked up in May was Lucky Girl Summer by Morgan Elizabeth, which I rated 4 stars. Morgan Elizabeth thus far has not let me down. This is book number 2 in her series called Down the Shore, I think, because she is a Jersey Shore girl, like literally born and raised in the Jersey Shore. And this book series is dedicated to her love of the Jersey Shore. So that's the setting for this book, as well as the first book in the series, which is called Tourist Trap. There we go. It's called Lucky Girl Summer, and this was absolutely adorable. This book follows June, who at the beginning of the story is a school teacher. However, she is extremely burnt out on being a school teacher. And at the end of the school year, they basically tell her, hey, by the way, can't come back next year. We actually don't have enough room or money to pay you to be a teacher here this year. So hopefully somebody retires and you can come back next year. But in the meantime, the only other job we can offer you is an hour away. And she's like, are you fucking kidding me? These options are horrible. Like, be unemployed for a year, drive an hour to work for a year, both horrible choices. So she decides that she is going to essentially manifest being the luckiest person alive. And she starts making some really wild decisions after winning a lottery ticket. Or like, you know, she played a lottery ticket and won. Anyways, so after that, she decides to say, fuck it. Doesn't want to be a teacher anymore. She gets a new job where she is now the assistant to the lead project manager at a hotel chain? Question mark? A resort chain? Anyway, there's a new resort being built, made in her town, and what's his name? Graham. Graham is the project manager over like the entire resort project. She ends up becoming his assistant, and things just go from there. Now, with the 4 stars, I will say there were some things that like low-key pissed me off about this book. That's why it's not a 5-star. Otherwise, it probably would have been, to be honest, because it was really good. Not really going to go into the reasons why this book pissed me off, because they would all be spoilers. But if you would like to know, you can leave a comment down below, and I will absolutely tell you, because your girl loves to yap. Have I ever been this hot in my life? I'm like severely worried that this is not filming. Anyways, book number 5 that I read in the month of May was The Divorce by Freida McFadden. I love Freida McFadden's books for the sake of being palate cleansers and being really entertaining and fast-paced, and you know, you get through them really quickly because of that, but they're almost never good. So The Divorce is Freida's most recent release. And I listened to the audiobook all in one sitting. It took me literally like 3.5, maybe 4 hours to listen to it. It was entertaining. I will give you that. This story follows the point of view of 2 different girls. You've got one girl who comes home one day to her husband and their child. And he says, hey, actually you can't come in. I randomly decided for our anniversary that we're gonna renovate the house, and because of that, we need to go stay in an apartment for a while. And actually, your happy anniversary, you're gonna go clean it by yourself tonight, and you can't come home. And by the way, our kid is gonna stay here with me. No, it's fine. I have dinner handled. Just go clean this apartment for us. And she's so ridiculous. She's like, okay, kind of weird, but you know what? It's an anniversary present. That's really cool that you decided to renovate our house randomly and I can't come inside. Whatever. She goes to this other place and some weird shit happens, but long story short, the next day her husband's like, hey, by the way, I want a divorce. What? Then the other point of view is essentially following his mistress. That's not a spoiler because you find that out pretty quickly. This was so hyper specific as far as like, didn't really have a plot, or were you just explaining in grave detail what it would be like to be divorced and your husband be cheating on you and trying to get custody of your child? Yeah, the plot twist on this one was kind of boring, also kind of confusing, but it was entertaining. I'll give you that. It kept me turning the pages. I didn't want to put it down, but it was pretty meh. So we're gonna go with 3 stars. Jumping into June, I apparently read 11.5 books in the month of June, which is awesome. Now, in addition to those 11.5 books, I also halfway read a couple of other books, which I didn't write down, so hopefully I remember to talk to you about them. Starting off with the first book that I read in the month of June, I listened to Bound by Ali Hazelwood, which at the moment is only in audio format, I think. They will probably end up publishing it physically because they just did that with Two Can Play, which was previously only in audio. So I went into this with no idea what it was about and was really pleasantly surprised because it's a vampire book. And if you read Ali Hazelwood's short story that she put out last fall, Hot for Slayer, I think it was called. Yeah, I immediately needed more vampire romance from Ali Hazelwood, and this one scratched that itch. It was 4 stars for me. This gave dark academia, vampires, typical Ali writing style. It was amazing. So this story follows Vera, who is a college student. She grew up with her parents being like really morally gray, so it's made her really morally gray. And she has basically been working with this man who has taught her the art of bookbinding, and they basically make fake versions of really old books that they are selling for a really large amount of money. So they're conning people by making fake expensive books. There's probably a better way to say that. I don't know how else to say it. Anyway, she ends up meeting this other guy named Victor, who I believe is like a professor at the college that she's going to. And he ends up enlisting her in this situation where he's like, hey, let's take your bookbinding skills and your ability to make fakes, and we're gonna like do it from scratch. Because I think like she's basically, with the other guy, she's making these books out of books that already exist. So she's never made one from scratch before, and this other guy wants her to make it from scratch. In any case, he ends up being a vampire, and there's some weird stuff going on, and it was very, very, very interesting, and I loved it. The next book that I read in June, and this is not the 0.5, I probably should have just rounded to 11. I read a short story, that's what I'm trying to get at. I read, I believe is the 5th book in this short story series that got published. I didn't really care about any of the other authors or stories that got put out, but this one was Summer Thaw by Rebecca Genshak. This is an author I've been wanting to read from, so I figured this would be a good place to start, and it wasn't. This book, in my opinion, was just not good. I gave it 2.5 stars. I personally hate when people give reviews for short stories and they complain about it being short. Because obviously, did you not know that going into it? However, this one, my problem. I knew that it was a short story, but this felt incredibly short for being a short story. It was like, here's your female main character, she meets the male main character, boom, they're in love, and it's a thing. It just happened so quickly, and there was like hardly anything that was going on. It's also a college level sports romance, but they feel like they're 15. I just didn't enjoy it. The next book that I picked up in June is one of my physical books. Yeah, we're finally going back to physical books. I guess at this point I had all my books like set up, and I was finally able to go back to physical reading. So the first book that I picked up is Your Knife, My Heart by K.M. Moronova. If you guys did not know, K.M. Moronova is also an artist. So she has personally designed all of her covers. All of her books have some interior artwork as well, which is my favorite because hello, we need more art in paperbacks. And then she also typically does character artwork inside the books as well. And I also read book 2, by the way. I'll get to that in a second. But this was my start of her Dark Forces world. Dark Forces is basically a section of the military that is underground. Nobody knows about it. It's very dark. They're basically taking people who would otherwise just be rotting in jail because they've done something really bad, and they are enlisting them into the Dark Forces and training them to be basically like Black Ops. I have actually never read a military romance before, so this is my first military romance. I was shocked, actually. I really, really enjoyed book 1. It is a duology, so the second book to that series is My Blade, Your Back. You have to read both of them. This one ends on a cliffhanger. You're going to want to pick up book 2 immediately. I did like book 1 more than book 2. However, I did enjoy the overall story. So the overall story is basically you've got Emery and Cameron, who goes by Maury. Emery has been forced to be the professional executor for her family. She ends up getting caught, basically, and now she's about to serve life in prison when she gets enlisted into the Dark Forces. There is obviously where she meets Cameron. She gets paired up with Cameron, and Cameron he's going through something because the Dark Forces has basically been experimenting with essentially super soldiers. So they have made some type of super soldier serum that they've given it to other people, but Cameron is the only one who's survived. Everyone else has died while taking this medication, and Cameron is the only one who has survived, though he is having a hard time staying alive. He's got some problems going on. It's really like messing with him mentally and physically, but he is alive at this moment in time. Something else that this medication is causing him to do is he kills every single person he's ever partnered up with. So when they introduce him to Emery, they're like, hey, try not to kill her. They're basically telling her, like, you might die. Sorry, but like we need to see if like pairing him up with a different type of person will keep him from killing everybody. So they get paired up, and they are essentially like enemies-ish to lovers, obviously. I won't say it's a good time because it is very dark. Like, check your triggers. If dark romance is not your thing, skip it, but it definitely lives up to the name of dark military romance. I will say that. Now, the next 6 books that I read was an entire manga series, and actually it's manhwa, not manga. That is because it's the Korean version of manga called manhwa, and they are yaoi. Anyway, they're male. The series is called The Dangerous Convenience Store by 945, and this was actually mostly a reread for me. So I read the first 4 books when they were coming out last year, and then I had to wait on books 5 and 6 to come out, and basically in between that I was like, nah, I don't feel like reading this anymore. So I did reread the first 4 books and then read the final 2 books, and this is a 5-star series for me. I obviously love male books, and to have it be illustrated at the same time, loved it. I will say it's very spicy. Very spicy. So if you are not okay with that, please do not pick this up. It absolutely will not be for you. But this story basically follows Yoon-jun, who is a young guy who works at, you guessed it, a dangerous convenience store. It's a convenience store where a lot of mobsters end up coming in and there's always like gunfights and people stealing stuff and all kinds of crazy stuff. A gangster comes in one day named Gunnu, and Gunnu is this older, probably like 40 years old compared to Ijun, who is maybe like 24, maybe? So there's an age gap situation, and there's also like a size difference. So Ijun is like this little skinny white boy, and Gunnu is this really, really tall, jacked guy. Let me see if I can find a picture of them without it being too spicy. Okay, that's not the greatest example, but just so you can see like their size difference. So anyway, long story short, 5-star series for me. Absolutely loved it. And what is technically the last book that I finished in June, I read a thriller, which was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, and let me fucking tell you, this shit was wild. Absolutely wild. This story follows a husband and a wife as they travel to Scotland for a weekend away. You learn pretty quickly that their marriage is having some problems, and this weekend away is kind of her way of trying to fix things between them. In between each one of, maybe not each one, maybe it is everyone, I don't know. Anyway, there's like a second point of view, which is written from the perspective of letters. So they're letters from his wife, and there's some weird shit going on in the present day as well as in these letters from the past, and it's absolutely wild. It is brilliant. I am convinced Alice Feeney is the greatest thriller writer ever. I don't read a whole heck of a lot of thrillers, but hers are top notch. Every single one of her plot twists are absolutely insane. The 2 books that I've read by her are just, they're next level. They are almost hard to like keep track of because you're just like, what the fuck, the entire time. So absolutely love that. That was 4 stars for me. Some honorable mentions. At the tail end of June, I did pick up A Stage Set for Villains by Shannon J. Spann, and I did actually finish that today, 4 days into July. So you'll be hearing about that in a little bit, but I did read about half of that in the month of June. In addition to that, I also read part of a nonfiction book in the month of June called Ikigai, which is about the Japanese philosophy, Ikigai, which is basically like finding your purpose in life. That has been super enlightening. I started with the audiobook and ended up buying the physical copy for me and my mom because it was profound as fuck, and I needed to highlight it, basically every sentence. So still working my way through that. And what else have I been reading? I'm reading something on my, to the Morgan Elizabeth universe, because when I started Lucky Girl Summer, I found out pretty quickly that, so I knew that Morgan Elizabeth had a release in between Tourist Trap coming out this year and Lucky Girl Summer coming out this year, and it is called Man Eater. They do not look related literally whatsoever, so I did not pick up that book. However, pretty quickly into reading Lucky Girl Summer, I realized that they are interconnected. Not a huge deal, but there was an introduction of the characters from Man Eater that I wasn't aware of because I didn't read the book. So I currently am still working my way through reading Man Eater by Morgan Elizabeth. Okay, hopefully that wasn't the worst video ever recorded. If you stuck around this long, I sincerely appreciate you. If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you've read any of these books and you have some thoughts and feelings, please leave them down below. And yeah, I'm gonna be awkward until I film more videos. Okay, bye.